All right, man, peace. So, brothers, what recent history in the NBA has shown is that in order for a team to ascend to the higher levels of the NBA and have a realistic opportunity to compete for a championship, they need a dominant wing or dominant wings. And what the Philadelphia 76ers were missing last season, even though their season was successful, they won, I believe, 50 games or more, got to the playoffs, got to the second round. It was very clear that what they were missing was a great wing player, an athlete. It showed in their series against the Boston Celtics when they lost in 5 games. Well, in the trade for Jimmy Butler, they seem to have attained that wing that they so desperately needed. Not only is he a great athlete, he can guard basically 3 positions on the defensive end. He also can create his own shot, and he's a great clutch player. So he's taken their team to a whole other level. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
I don't know how this Sixers season is going to turn out, or if Jimmy Butler will in fact play out his days in Philadelphia, riding off into the sunset with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. All I do know is that Butler is...
Let me say this, that situation does have the potential to go bad. Because we know that Jimmy Butler, he can be cantankerous, he can be confrontational, and Joel Embiid seems to have a bit of narcissism within his DNA, as does Ben Simmons. But the good part about that team mixture is that Ben Simmons is not somebody who's looking to shoot the basketball. So it's going to work out for them in regards to shot selection and who is allowed to shoot the basketball. We know that Jimmy Butler is mostly going to be working from about 18 feet out. Every once in a while he drives the basket. Joel Embiid, in my view, he needs to post up more, especially in the deep post. He likes to face up too much and he takes too many three-pointers. But these are things that they can work on because Jimmy Butler is going to act as a leader for their team, a leader that they need, to be quite frank with you.
Butler is clearly what Philadelphia needed right now.
Agreed.
Now, he has only played 7 games for the Sixers, and yet twice he has already hit a game-winning shot in the final seconds. And of course, Jimmy's not going to keep up this pace of game winners. But it's also not just a random accident he's been hitting them. Watch what he did against the Nets last night. This is nice, guys, right?
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
Nasty stuff. I feel like I've seen that before.
Yes.
Well, see, there's the thing. We will side-by-side it with his last second game winner against the Hornets from earlier in the month. And when Jimmy was asked about the similarity, he said he was so frustrated by the Sixers' loss this past Friday night, he went into the gym extra on Saturday to work on this particular shot from this particular spot on the floor. And then Sunday, he went out and hit it. And that is part of why he is so valuable to the Sixers. He is not only a guy who can create his own shots in late game situations, he is determined as hell to be that guy, just like he is determined to be the guy who defends and fights down the stretch. Want to see what Butler did last night just before his game winner? Yeah, he is the one diving on the floor to secure possession. And he's also, well, simply on the floor. You know, we take Butler's ability to play through injuries for granted just because he's done it so much.
Somebody who plays as hard as Jimmy Butler, he's going to win you at least 4 to 5 games a year just off of his dogged determination. Because in the crunch, in the clutch times, most of these guys really just don't want it as hard as certain people. Every generation, there are about 4 or 5 players who desperately want to win every game. And in this generation of the NBA, he's one of those players. No, he's not the most talented player in the league, but he's one of those guys who wants to win every game. He wants to win every possession. And that's going to get you 4 to 5 wins a year, depending on how talented a player that person is. Michael Jordan, he was that type of player. And then on top of that, he was also the most gifted and the hardest worker in the NBA. That's why the Bulls were able to win a lot of those games in the regular season, especially in the second three-peat, when his mental understanding of the game caught up to his physical abilities.
And it did reach the point of high comedy when he stopped doing that for Minnesota. Shout out General Soreness. Yeah, right there. But there he was late last night, 2 nights after spraining his ankle against Cleveland, playing as if nothing was wrong. And his new teammates seem to love all of it. In fact, if there's been any whose team is this stuff in the Philly locker room, we haven't seen it. On IG last night, Jimmy posted this clip, giving some shine to a Joel Embiid self-alley-oop. And there's Joel in the comments giving him shine right back. It is all a lot of fun.
We'll see how long this lasts.
And a great way for the Sixers to not have to talk about their other huge storyline that just won't go away. Yes, Markelle Fultz is in New York today seeing yet another specialist about his shoulder. And unlike in the past, the Sixers brass isn't going out of their way to protect him on it. Both Coach Brett Brown and GM Elton Brand have said they are unaware of any physical issue he is having.
That's their way of saying, you know what, we're out on Markelle Fultz. It's like a chick that you're talking to and she just keeps pissing you off for no reason. After a while, I say, you know what, let's just go our separate ways because you're clearly dysfunctional.
Oh, and yesterday, the Philadelphia Inquirer's Keith Pompey, who has been plugged in on that beat for a long time, reported Fultz, quote, is no longer in the Sixers' long-term plans. It's hard to say exactly what that means. Fultz' trade value is...
And, you know, Stephen A. Smith reported that there are some off-the-court issues that Markelle Fultz is dealing with, particularly pertaining to his family. And that's why so many of these teams, they do their due diligence in researching what an athlete's family background is, because that can affect their outlook, that can affect their performance, that can affect their determination, things of that nature, especially if you have family members who are constantly trying to pry into that athlete's pockets. That's going to cause a distraction for them on the basketball court.
Value is so low right now that, well, yeah, I bet a number of teams would be willing to take a flyer on him. I don't imagine they'd be willing to give the Sixers all that much. And this isn't one of those situations where a change of scenery feels like the magic elixir. His problems don't seem to be about the environment. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some clarity after today's medical appointment. Maybe not. Either way, the Sixers are getting enough sunshine from Jimmy Butler right now. It isn't mattering as much as it might once have. And that's a win, at least for now.
Exactly, for now. I believe even Rachel Nichols understands that the situation is a bit combustible, especially with those personality types in their locker room.
So, Kevin, we got to talk about the Markelle Fultz situation because the Jimmy Butler fireworks are nice. This is their #1 overall pick that they traded to get and gave away another high first-round draft pick for.
Right, but that's actually one issue, which is as you measure his value, this is a sunk cost. You can't assess him differently because, hey, we got our #1 pick. He is a player on the roster with liabilities and assets,
right,
and now you need to measure him that way. Let me throw out a scenario here, and I have no intel that the Atlanta Hawks say are interested. But here you have a team that is a long way from contending. They are all about player development. They have a guard, a dynamic one in Trae Young, who, by the way, a little bit of a defensive liability, but boy, what a playmaker. They have a two-guard whose contract is up, a veteran in Kent Bazemore, who's probably not in their long-term plans. What if you just took a flyer? You have nothing but picks in Atlanta. What if you said, hey, we've got 4 years to develop them, and oh, by the way, his head coach would be a former Sixers assistant who is one of the best player development coaches in the league, who knows what his defensive potential is and knows what his offensive potential could be. So, and now there's no expectation. By the way, there's no media in Atlanta.
That's not nice. There's a newspaper there. Thank you. Are you from Atlanta?
Hey,
you are from Atlanta.
Shout out to Chris Bibblemore.
AJC.
Shout out to Chris. Wow. He does an amazing job on the beat. But my point is have you ever seen the media in Philadelphia versus the media in Atlanta?
I agree with that. Those East Coast media hubs, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., they will eat athletes alive if they're not on point.
If that was your version of a shout-out, I don't want him to ever shout out either one of us.
My point is that he would be under a lot less scrutiny for a team who has no imperative to win right now. In fact, might have an imperative not to win. He could develop, boy, what a backcourt that could be.
Okay, but is that a good deal for the Sixers? Do you want to do this kind of thing if you're the Sixers? Do you want to give up on him right now?
Absolutely, you have to. You have to give up on him right now. Sounds unfortunate, but you do. Because more likely than not, they're going to give the extension to Jimmy Butler. Markelle Fultz is a #1 overall draft pick. You don't draft guys #1 overall to be the sixth man. You just don't. And right now, that's his ceiling. Markelle Fultz's ceiling right now for the Philadelphia 76ers is as a sixth man. He knows that. That's why he wants out. And that's why he decided that he was going to have his shoulder checked out after they traded for Butler, because he knows that he has no opportunity to become a starter on that team. More likely than not, they're going to try to sign Butler to the extension. At the very least, they're going to be looking to sign him to the extension. So that means that the future is not good for Markelle Fultz in Philadelphia.
I am not convinced that he will not be able to be a effective NBA player.
Right, but being drafted #1 overall, they expect a lot more than quote-unquote effectiveness.
will he be able to deliver as a number one pick, though? And then the burden of expectation, I think maybe not even just the media in Atlanta or a place like that, but the fan base, right? The Sixers fan base is rabid, and they have followed this step by step by step as if it was an ongoing soap opera. And they have all that baggage of expectation on Markelle to perform, and he knows that. And then you get self-conscious, and then you start to check your Twitter mentions, you start to get in your own head at the free throw line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where I don't think it'd be a magic elixir to be a change of scenery, but certainly I think he could shed some of that baggage and have a fresh start.
In a way, I kind of feel like Philadelphia has been the softest spot for him. I mean, they have been every step of the way. I mean, yes, there were some conflicting things or some misplays early on with how much information they were releasing. But they have been every step of the way last season. Okay, do what you want. You don't want to play. You do want to play now. Okay, you want to work out in front of reporters. We don't think that's so great, but sure, do it, that kind of thing. His teammates have been super, super supportive.
He's, by the way, like absolutely beloved.
Right?
Top to bottom.
Everyone in that locker room has done nothing but defend him. And because, yes, I get it. I think you're right. Sunken costs are sunken costs. And that money is already spent. So you can't, but they did make a huge investment in him. So I think they would be naturally more invested in seeing him succeed than whoever the next team is going to be like, oh, we got you for a bunch of quarters. So
here's the fundamental problem, and you understand this, isn't it?
Right, but right now, Rachel Nichols, I mean, this is a cost-effective measure. What is the ceiling for Markelle Fultz? After a while, due to a long length of time where you're just not productive, you no longer can be evaluated as a first-round draft pick, picked number one overall. You have to be evaluated as somebody who we hope we can give 20 minutes a game to and who can help us possibly win a championship, because the Philadelphia 76ers are not a team whose highest hopes are just to make the playoffs. Their ceiling is getting to the NBA Finals. It really is. At the very least, they have to get to the Eastern Conference Finals to improve upon last season. They've added Jimmy Butler. So do you really want a player like a Markelle Fultz, who seems to be having psychological issues, to be thrown into that bubbling cauldron in the midst of the playoffs? Right now, I think that it's best for both parties if Markelle Fultz gets traded.
As a Sixer guy, their timeline got accelerated, right? Last season was supposed to be the, hey, we won 39 games and gave it a real go, and where it was in the race till the last couple of weeks, and this was supposed to be the 2010 Oklahoma City Thunder 7 seed playing, their hearts out, and by virtue of that acceleration, Fultz got put into a tough spot.
Well, Dave, 16-game winning streaks change it all.
Yeah, exactly. The schedule at the end of the season. And I want to talk about that, Dave, though, where they are now as a whole, because look, they're 5-2 with Butler. But that's a little deceptive. A lot of those games have been extremely close. They clearly still need shooting. On this accelerated timeline that Kevin's talking about, Dave, do you think they are on track to contend for being the best title in the East?
I think
they're on track to possibly being the second best team in the East, depending on whether or not the Celtics are able to turn it around. I need to see how they perform in their next matchup against the Boston Celtics. We'll see. It's still very early in the season. Everyone is chirping about how the Celtics have pretty much started out as a 500 team through 20 games. I need to see how Philadelphia looks against Boston in their next matchup, and to see just how big of a difference Jimmy Butler has made in regards to their effectiveness against the athleticism of the Celtics.
If they can re-sign Jimmy Butler this summer, they have a appropriate core that could compete for championship. This year, though, they have no depth. Virtually no depth, especially when you're talking about a team like Toronto, who is perhaps...
Well, Toronto's on a whole other level.
Perhaps not even just the deepest team in the East, but maybe the deepest team in the league. And so all of a sudden you're going to be able to contend against a team like that in a 7-game series where they come at you at waves, excuse me, and then shooting's a part of it. And then also, listen, Ben Simmons is not championship level yet. He has all the tools to be, but until he can shoot a jump shot, they will not be able to I think, be a really good team in a 7-game series.
It's a superstar league, and I remember what Bob Myers once told Zach Lowe, that actually depth is less important because you're playing shorter rotate.
Absolutely. I've been saying that for the longest time. So many of these guys that get on TV and they tell you about these teams and how they have great depth. Nobody's going 10 deep in the playoffs, and by the time you get to the conference final round and the finals, your best players are getting 45-plus minutes. That's just how it goes. So when people start chirping about this team is deep and that team is deep, it's easy to look deep when you're playing against the Orlando Magic. When you're in Game 5 against the Golden State Warriors trying to stave off elimination, you're not going to the 10th guy on the bench.
expectations. I still love Toronto's depth, by the way.
Right.
And I still like them as the favorite right now. But I think they could. And this is probably more a statement of Boston's fallibility, Milwaukee's inexperience, and Toronto just still having that little bit of a Toronto cloud also.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm not buying into the Toronto cloud anymore. Because with Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, I expect them to show a lot of their championship pedigree when the moment counts. And to get the ball out of Kyle Lowry's hands and put it in Kawhi Leonard's hands. And at the very least, be able to make some of the crucial defensive stops that Toronto could not make last year when they had DeRozan.
The health issue, both Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard. I mean, in the Philadelphia, can you name a better big three in the East at this point?
But you need 9 guys, right? And they have
And
maybe
they have
6
8 and a
half.
half.
You think 8 and a half?
I mean, look, going 2 for 1.
In the playoffs, you don't need 9 guys. You need a really good 7-man rotation. Maybe 8-man rotation if you want to go that deep. But when you get to the finals in those crucial moments, you need to have a strong 7 guys that you can depend on.
In the trade for Butler, you can see that, right?
Yes.
You can see where it's hurting them. You have to, again, Kyle Korver trade watch continues in that you have to think they will make a deal, if not for Kyle, for someone to kind of help bolster that up. Again, it hurts their depth that their guy who they drafted number 1 overall last year is not playing. You would assume he would be filling out some of those spots. We'll be watching for his medical update as the.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how things turn out for the Philadelphia 76ers. Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Markelle Fultz. So peace.